evening and welcome to the ZWAC Show. ZWAC stands for the Zero Waste Advocacy Committee of the Northern California Recycling Association. I'm your host, John Moore. Every month we try, not always, but we try to host a show that features things that resonate from the past in zero waste advocacy and try to tie those to new and cool things that are going on today. And oddly enough, tonight's show blends both of those things because we've had many segments talking about the pioneers of zero waste fighting incinerators, garbage burners. Dan Knapp, who's with us right now, has been one of those. And it was easy to think that that fight was over with. Those things happened 40 or 50 years ago. And why would anybody want to burn garbage? But in California, we had a company called Covanta, and they hung on for dear life with their two facilities. One was in, it's either Modesto or Merced, and the other was in Long Beach. And we find now that they have closed the one in Long Beach, and they're now, thanks to the advocacy of the people we're talking to tonight, are going to close the Stanislaus, the Modesto facility by December. So that's great news. Why would anybody want to burn garbage? And why would you want one of those things in your community? So tonight, I'm going to interview Bianca Lopez, who is the co-founder of a group called Valley Improvement Projects that was central to this fight that took 20 long years to win. But sometimes those things that take longer to accomplish are more fun to savor. So Bianca, thanks for joining us tonight. First off, tell us what Valley Improvement Projects is. It doesn't have a very sexy name.
Good evening. My name is Bianca. I'm co-founder of Valley Improvement Projects, and my husband is the other co-founder. And Emiliano Mataca was our third co-founder, who is no longer with us past several years ago, but left us with this mission to continue the fight for social and environmental justice in Stanislaus County. We decided to call ourselves Valley Improvement Projects because we knew that we didn't have one project and that we wanted to see a variety of things happening in our community. And so we wanted to be as vague as possible. Plus, we also wanted funders and agencies to be able to fund us. And so while we might wanted to have a stronger name, we thought Valley Improvement Projects was safe enough for people to want to support us financially and not be too scared of the work that we're doing.
So besides the incinerator, what kind of improvement projects were you advocating for?
Well, really, I'll tell you how we started off. We started off doing Know Your Rights and cop watching. We found that my husband and I, who went to school at Humboldt State in the year 2000, when we graduated and left Humboldt State, he came back to his community, which is here in Stanislaus County, and I went back home to my family in LA. I decided to come back to my then boyfriend, now husband, Tom, to live in a much smaller community. I could not tolerate living in a big city any longer after living in Arcata for almost a decade, and I loved being in a small town. So when I came up here, we started to get to know friends and build relationships and build community with folks here. We ran into the Mataca family, who had been long advocates in the community, who had been fighting the Wesley tire fire that had happened here in the town of Wesley, right next to Grayson, where the Matacas had moved into in the mid-90s, I believe. And so Arsenio Mataca, who was working with who was studying to be a lawyer or going to take his bar exam, said, you know what, I think you would like to meet, you'd get along with my brother Emiliano. And so we met Emiliano, and Emiliano said, let's do this, let's, and then in 2009, Oscar Grant was assassinated by a police officer at the BART station. And we had been getting word that there were Black and brown people who had been asked to leave public property during, big events on the weekends, and outside of when we used to have a club that played a lot of hip hop music on 9th and J Street. And so we went out there to do Know Your Rights training and to cop watch. And actually, my husband and I were illegally arrested and detained, released several hours after we were handcuffed and put behind a car. And then we came back the next day to show people that, yes, they might have intimidated us and that we were handcuffed and we were placed behind a car, but we were illegally detained, and that we were coming back because we had the right to. And so then the cops would no longer mess with us in that way. But we continued to host community barbecues, did film screenings, just created a space for people to come and share their concerns. And that's when we started to, Emmy said, well, you know what? There's also an incinerator that we've been fighting since the early 2000s. They tried to expand by bringing medical waste, but they fought it and prevented from medical waste from being burned at this facility in 2002, I believe. And so he showed us videos of them protesting. And then we realized, well, shoot, this is an air quality issue, right? Like, why we started to learn, well, why is incineration not good? And so we started to dive into more of the air quality concerns. And then slowly learned about the high pesticide use in Stanislaus County and the whole Central Valley. And then we started to learn about infrastructure and zoning. And so all of these, language access even, right? So the social aspect of it. So we saw a direct connection between a lot of these issues that community members were sharing, which is why we said Valley Improvement Projects. You know, this is a very general thing because all of these concerns that community members have been sharing, even like meeting with homeless people at the parks, hosting these community barbecues, we were hearing a lot of the same concerns. And so we started to just be more involved. We were all volunteers. Realizing and acknowledging that at the city council meetings, board of supervisor meetings, the air district meetings, the DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substance Control meetings, agency meetings, where these decisions were taking place. But regular people don't know that. And regular people who are working and just surviving on a day-to-day basis were not very involved in these spaces. And so we said, well, you know, we have a 9-to-5 job, so we'll volunteer and we'll be learners in these spaces and give our opinion based on what we hear community members sharing. And then slowly we were able to now have a team of 6 people. There's 5 of us who are full-time, and John Mataka is a part-time staff of VIP. And we're continuing to grow. We're currently going to be hiring 2 more new people to join us on a part-time basis to help us with the community outreach. So all of these social and environmental justice issues are interconnected and can't be left and addressed alone.
So that's an interesting approach. You go from Humboldt State to community activism, and you have sort of focused on the incinerator and realized, as a lot of people come to realize, this is complicated stuff. There's a lot of people that know a lot more about the politics than you do, that know more about the technical stuff than you do. And somehow you have to wade through a lot of stuff to figure out what's true and what isn't. That's a time-consuming thing.
It is. My husband was going to law school at the time. Emiliano was a family liaison at the Ceres Unified School District. I was coordinating an after-school program in Riverbank Unified School District. So we had our hands full, just, you know, living and paying our bills. It was over the weekends and the evenings that we invested our time in learning more. And so we started to build connections and relationships and networking with organizations that have been doing this kind of work for many years prior to us. Learning the history, which is something that we've noticed that a lot of community members, or just disadvantaged communities in general, we don't have a collective memory. We don't have this shared memory that of things that people have experienced and gone through, and the fights that we've won or maybe even lost, to be able to continue to educate and teach the community members that are, growing up in these communities about our past, so that we can move forward together. And so that's one of our missions too, is to be able to record our current struggles and continue to navigate these issues with young people who are experiencing the same issues and having the same concerns. And we can say, well, yeah, that's not new, right? And this is how we did it, and this is what worked for us, and this is what didn't work for us. So we were much more, I don't want to say militant, but we were more, what's the word? Provocative in a sense, when we found out that Covanta and Boyet Petroleum were the two main sponsors for the city of Modesto's Earth Day. We were shocked. How can the two polluting sources be the main sponsors for an Earth Day event? We thought that was crazy. So we started to host our own Earth Day event across the street at the Enslin Park, right down the street from Grisada Park, where this big event was held. And then we started protesting at the event. And then we started to basically harass Covanta at their booth, and we would have signs with stats about Covanta and the emissions that they would create in our community, and we would be very dramatic. We would say something like, Covanta kills, Covanta causes asthma, Covanta causes low birth weight. We were very intentional at targeting, just Covanta at Earth Day, until the city of Modesto decided to no longer allow them to be sponsors. And we had set these standards for the city of Modesto. We will continue to protest your events, and we will continue to host our own event until you stop allowing Covanta and Boyet Petroleum to be sponsors of this event. And then we also had some demands about the waste that they were producing, the things that they were allowing for companies and agencies and businesses and organizations to come and produce at this event. So because of our advocacy work, generators are also not allowed. They had, I forget this radio station that was from Clear Channel, that was a very conservative radio station where like Rush Limbaugh was had some airtime. And so we're saying you can't allow for these kinds of voices to be elevated at an Earth Day event. And so they stopped doing a lot of this stuff and have implemented policies and practices to prevent that from happening in the future.
Great. Wonderful.
But surely Covanta has a lot of money and resources to fight that, don't they?
Yes, but we also had a lot of time. So we would just show up wherever Covanta was and protest. And I think they got tired of that. Recently, they showed up 2 years ago. They showed up, was it 2 years ago? Last year in November, or at the end of October, they showed up to a Dia de los Muertos event in downtown Modesto. It's a big community event for the Day of the Dead, where people put up altars in memory of people they've lost. And so Covanta decided to have a table there and have pictures of the deceased family members of their workers. And so ironically, they were right next to the American Society's table, and so I knew that organization and the facilitator of that table, and so I said, "Hey, Lupe, meet Covanta. Covanta produces cancer, and you help people with cancer. You should meet." And I kind of just stood there in between those two booths, and as people were passing by, I would say, "Hey, come meet Covanta and come meet the Cancer Association," right? Like I completely left my booth and made sure that Covanta felt welcome.
So your strategy was just to irritate them until they quit.
Yeah, and they did. They didn't come back out.
So going back to the medical waste expansion, which they didn't get, and which I imagine you organized opposition to, how many people were you able to get to show up to things, and what kind of how did you expand your organization's reach?
So I was not here at that time, but that was in early 2000s. So about 2002, Bradley Angel from Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice in the Bay Area, and the Gaia, which is the Global Alliance for Incineration Alternatives, got together because you guys have been fighting this fight for many years, and outside of this area. But you guys all knew, and I say you guys because there's a lot of people in this room that probably know each other and have been fighting incinerators for much longer than I have. But they came to the community, found John with the Grayson Neighborhood Council and Arsenio and Emiliano Mataca, their family, and said, hey, do you know that there's this incinerator in your community? And not only is it there, but they're looking to expand and burn medical waste. And so John's and his family and his community were tasked to reaching people in the city of Modesto, who is one of the contracting communities. The city of Modesto and the county, Stanislaus County, were the two jurisdictions that had a contract with the incinerator. And so they thought, they'd come into Modesto because they're from the southwest side of the county, come to the biggest city in the county and say, did you know that this is happening? Mind you, there was also other facilities that community members had been trying to stop, and maybe Vivian or somebody else I saw a couple of folks from our community, Susan, might remember there was a fight to shut down or to stop a nuclear facility that was also going to be coming to Stanislaus County. And so they said, we need to get people who vote and people who look like the Board of Supervisors to care. So it was very intentional to get white voting community members to pay attention to this and say, we need your help. And because this is happening on the west side of our community, which is now we call the dumping ground of the county. They had about 200 people come out in support of this fight to stop the expansion of the waste incinerator. I can actually send you a link to some video footage from Green Action's YouTube page. There's a short video, about 12 minutes, where it kind of highlights and talks about the solidarity between folks fighting incineration in Arizona and California and in different states, where they were coming together to say, we also have this issue in our community and we stand in solidarity. So that helped a lot to confirm and affirm that the community was in the right path. So building relationships with other organizations and other people who had been fighting was very essential to this movement.
And being strategic about it too. So I have been to the Covanta facility. We toured it. I was with Monica Wilson of Gaia when we toured it, and they trotted out. It was a very shiny, spiffy place. All the knobs and dials were polished up. Everybody's lab jacket was clean, crispy clean. And the people with the lab coats were very sincere in saying, oh, we burn everything with a really high temperature. There's not going to be emissions. We're not letting loose anything in this community. This is perfectly okay. They must have prodded out those people at the city council. How did you deal with that?
It is very hard to go up against some really good greenwashing language. So they, like you said, Covanta has money, and they have their engineers use graphs and language that really just twists the reality of what really is going on in their facility. And when the Board of Supervisors don't have that knowledge and that background, it is very easy, and not just the Board of Supervisors, but any person who is in charge of making these decisions at jurisdiction level, it's really easy to say, well, of course, let's do that, right? So not only was it a waste incinerator, but it's a energy facility that was actually also counted for renewable energy credits and recycling. So it was an easy choice for the Board of Supervisors to say, great, if we just send you our trash, you'll turn it into energy.
Yeah.
And then they would check it off, right? And say, well, shoot, not only are we recycling, but we're going to create this new product. Unfortunately, we didn't even get to reap those benefits either, right? Like they would sell the credits to, I think recently they're being sold to PG&E. I'm not sure who they were sold to before, but PG&E turns around and sells that energy back to us, right? So it becomes very hard to fight against the greenwashing language that they're so good at. I mean, Covanta is now called Reworld.
No, that's great rebranding. But you know, they don't. It's not like they don't have allies. There are local franchise haulers in the county that take their stuff to Covanta. They like doing that. They have relationships with Covanta. Those hauling companies have unions. The unions like the hauling companies who like Covanta. That's a lot of organization against you. How do you cut through all them? Because it's their political influence, not just Covanta's.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure, but Covanta employees are not unionized here in Stanislaus County, and neither are the waste haulers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was a little bit different. I'm thinking that it might have been a bit different for those in Long Beach. The facility in Long Beach that was also run by Covanta, they were unionized, and they actually did oppose our bills, and a lot of the bills that came in place that pretty much created the situation that is now the political situation that we're in, that has caused Covanta to shut down and no longer be profitable in California.
Because we're celebrating tonight the announced closure of the Covanta facility, the last one standing in California. Hooray! Raise your glass to that. So,
Yes.
what was the one thing that put the nail in the coffin for Covanta?
AB 1857 was the last bill that we passed, the last bill that was passed in California. Valley Improvement Projects, Work with Californians Against Waste, and Earth Justice, and East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice in Long Beach, who were fighting the other incinerator, which basically reclassified what recycling is. Incineration was no longer considered recycling, and the jurisdictions that were sending their waste to the facility were no longer able to get diversion credits. And so it really caused jurisdictions to reconsider what they were going to do with their trash, because it was no longer considered a plan for recycling that they're obligated to. So that was the last straw, I think, that did it for Long Beach and for Stanislaus County. And there are some other things that were going to be coming into play that they were foreseeing. So the Department of Toxic Substance Control was also going to reclassify the ash that they produce, that the leftover ash from burning the waste was now going to have to be part of, was going to be classified as toxic, and then it would have to no longer go in our landfill here in Stanislaus County. It would have to get shipped to the Kettleman City toxic facility there, or the toxic landfill. So there were other things coming that they were already foreseeing, but AB 1857 was the last policy that made them realize that they are no longer profitable.
Well, congratulations for that. You had to cut the cash flow away from them to make them go away. That's usually
was the one way we starved it. So we also were starving the actual beast of like the material that they were burning. So if we enforced, or if we had a zero waste plan, then they would have less to burn. And that would actually cost our contracting communities, the county and the city of Modesto, money, right? Because this was a put or pay contract. If we did not give them the amount that we said we would give them, we would have to pay them money. And so that was another way that we were trying to starve the incinerator. Okay, fine. You don't want to leave on your own. The contracting communities don't want to eliminate this contract. Then let's do our best through a zero waste perspective to starve what is actually needing to go, or going to be going to the incinerator as well.
So we've talked on the show occasionally about the concept of using land use law to promote zero waste. Was your zero waste plan a land use plan that was going to reclassify the uses of the facility?
No, our zero waste plan does not have a land use plan. We've realized that our infrastructure was pretty good infrastructure, and we had some really good programs and incentives for community members to properly sort and divert things from the landfill. We just acknowledge that we don't even have to keep Covanta in mind. We don't even have to talk about Covanta. A zero waste plan would just get rid of it.
What's going to be left? Is anybody going to ask Covanta to clean up their mess?
You know, we have asked the city and the county to keep us in the loop, to tell us more about. These two articles that came out from Waste Dive, and the Modesto Bee, both, state and quote the city and the county saying we're still negotiating with Covanta. So they have not admitted that Covanta was going to be closing on December 2nd. Covanta has, but the city and the county are still in negotiations. We don't know what those negotiations actually include, but we have asked the city and the county to consider a just transition for the workers, to create a zero waste plan and commit to a zero waste goal. And then to ensure that the demolishing of the facility did not continue to pollute our communities, and that they hold Covanta responsible for the demolition of that facility.
It would be nice if they had that negotiation be in the public, wouldn't it?
Every conversation is being had behind closed doors, and we've made several public records requests, and we end up getting some BS documents, like emails of them setting up a meeting, but no discussion, no attachments, no actual concrete information. Board of Supervisors that we ask, city council members that we ask, we pick up the phone and say, hey, do you have an update? What is going on? What are you guys negotiating? None of them have been open and transparent as well.
I enjoy revealing to people how hard this is, but it's a two-edged sword. But you don't want to discourage people to get involved, but you have to make people realize that it's hard. In 1989, California passes landmark AB 939 to promote recycling. The bill says clearly that landfilling and incineration are not recycling. But yet for 40 years after that, there was these diversion credits for incineration that your AB 1857 finally killed. Why did it take so long to do that?
Well, AB 350 was a Clean Energy and Pollution Reduction Act of 2015, carved out a special clause that said incineration is no longer considered recycling except for the incinerator in Stanislaus County. So it really allowed the one here in Stanislaus County to continue. That had to be a political favor, and I'm not sure who was responsible for that. But we did get some privileges carved out in the law.
You'd have liked to have been a fly on the wall hearing that debated, huh?
Yes.
So what's next for Valley improvement projects?
We have a zero waste plan that we want to see the city and the county either adopt or use to adopt their own zero waste plan. We are exploring how a zero waste plan like the one that we produce can actually create more jobs than the incinerator has, and that we can actually keep things from the landfill. And so we're continuing to learn from other communities and what they're doing to keep things out of the landfill. So we just learned about through the Zero Waste Conference that we participated this week or last week. And for example, the Reuse Savannah in Georgia, they have a demolishing team, and they train their staff. They train the team, and then they also put them to work to demolish buildings one nail at a time, so that they can keep and reusing. They can keep those things out of the landfill by reusing and repurposing the material that they're breaking down, instead of just demolishing and sending it to the waste to the incinerator, sorry, not the incinerator, to the landfill. So looking at projects that other communities are doing that have been successful to keep things from the landfill is our task. So right now we've done an analysis of projects and programs that the city has. For example, they have a bulky item pickup and drop-off event. So twice a year, the city of Modesto will host a big event and say, bring all of your bulky items, and you can bring tires, you can bring mattresses, you can bring electronics, you can bring all sorts of things, bulky items, and they will obviously they have not obviously, but they have a recycling program for electronics, but then everything else gets demolished. And so we're saying, well, why can't we just connect with the secondhand stores, or Restore for Humanity, or Habitat for Humanity, and community members, and make it a drop off and take, and then we can figure out what we do with the rest, refurbish and repair before we toss into the landfill. So helping the city come up with those programs, we're asking the county to reassess their local task force. So there's a requirement for jurisdictions to have a waste management local task force that will identify a 5-year plan of what they're doing to keep things from the landfill. And so the county has this local task force that nobody shows up for. And so I think except for like once a year, probably, or once every 5 years, but in the last year, they've had one meeting. And they're supposed to have quarterly meetings, but they cancel them because they don't have quorum. And conveniently, they haven't had quorum since Valley Improvement Projects has been trying to get on the agenda. And so we're asking the county to reassess the purpose of that local task force and call it a zero waste task force. And so we're asking the city to also, influence the decision of the county to move forward. So we're really still advocating for zero waste. The county board of supervisors and the city council members want to pretend that they don't know what the next step is, that they don't know what the plan is, when they've been delivered a plan in their hand, almost literally, to consider implementing better systems countywide. We don't all have the same waste haulers. We're not all instructed to use our bins in the same manner. So some communities place some materials in their recycling bin, and others put it in their trash bin. We don't know if Jilton and Bertolotti, which are the two main waste haulers in our community, are actually sorting all the material, or even where the material is going if it's not going to the landfill. And so there's also a lack of transparency that we're trying to build more transparency and accountability to the community. The city of Modesto hasn't updated its contract with its waste haulers for over 30 years. And so, we have to say, well, what about this? And when they're actually negotiating a new contract as we speak now, but they're also very, very quiet about what are the concerns in the contract and what are they thinking of for updates in this contract. So if they're not willing to share with us, then we have to provide the what about, and have you considered this? Or don't forget to mention this in your negotiations.
So you have to learn about a lot of stuff, and then the face that tells people to do these things, right?
Yes, we even say, we'll connect you to these other organizations that know more than we do. Zero Waste USA, we'll write grants that will allow Zero Waste USA to be the consultant for you. You don't have to use public dollars, or you don't have to be the one writing the grant. We can be the community-based organization that partners with you to access these resources, whether it be technical assistance, expertise, communities, or just some time to be able to be like a soundboard for what they're thinking of what's next. So yeah, unfortunately, communities, disadvantaged communities, people of color, low income communities, advocates who serve these communities have to become scientists, lawyers. We have to become all sorts of things that we never thought we would. We just want to be able to, to live life freely, as some other people, get to benefit from. But instead, here we are fighting against these systems of oppression that continue to affect our day-to-day life.
Well, we're glad you're on the clock doing it. So does the city and county have any economic development programs? Some cities and counties have active economic development departments that try to encourage job growth, try to encourage entrepreneurship, a lot of the things that zero waste needs.
Yeah, let me tell you about that struggle. So California has the SURF, that is like for jobs first in California, the Community Economic Resiliency Fund. Millions of dollars are being invested. Sorry, there's a mosquito in here. Trying to task jurisdictions or regions to partner together to come up with an economic resiliency plan that suits their communities. And so here in Stanislaus County, we're partnering with San Joaquin County and Merced County. So one county north and one county south of us. We're in the middle. And unfortunately, the counties or these regions are looking at they're spending a lot of money. They're using a lot of public dollars, including ARPA funds, to invest in investigative sources of economic resilience. So one example is this: the county has invested over $10 million in this organization called Beam Circular. And Beam Circular's main task is to commodify ag waste. And so this company or this organization is looking at how they can convert ag waste into another source of financial resiliency, but for the same industries, right? Like the ag industry. But there is no real concrete example other than biofuels, the creation of biofuels with ag waste, even though there is a company who came to Stanislaus County, just down the street, less than a mile from where I live here in Riverbank, called Amethyst. They said, well, this is going to be a circular system. This is going to be sustainable. We're going to convert ag waste into jet fuel. Well, I mean, I don't need jet fuel. Nobody in Riverbank needs jet fuel, so I'm not sure how circular this is. And sustainable, it's not. We're not always going to have the same ag waste if we continue with climate change, the way climate change is going, the drought. And SGMA, there's water laws that are restricting the water use for farmers across the state. And so, while there might not be any caps on what kinds of farms or what kind of food we harvest, they are going to be limited in the water. And so they will have to reconsider what they're growing. But this company decided to said, you know what, it's actually not economically feasible to make jet fuel out of ag waste. We're going to go ahead and make jet fuel, but out of tallow. And we're going to ship that tallow from India. So they had a plan and they changed their plan because it's not economically feasible. We know that a lot of these transitional fuels and transitional systems like hydrogen and carbon capture are only going to be profitable because they get these government subsidies. And so when that ends, the government has also said these are transitional systems. So in 20, 30 years, these subsidies are going to go away. And so these are also part-time solutions, right? These are temporary solutions instead of actually looking at how do we actually grow our food to ensure that even the farmers have food and access to food. Right now, our farmers are having to go to food banks to get food. Right, even the farm workers who are picking the fruit and the vegetables can't feed their families. And so if we can reconsider and restructure our systems to meet our local needs, then we should be able to be resilient. But unfortunately, the state of California is really, and actually the federal government has imposed a lot of these new technologies on our communities. And so now here we are trying to create community benefit agreements and ensure that disadvantaged communities do not continue to be the dumping ground for industry. So yeah, there's money for economic resiliency, but it's not looking good either.
So it's okay for jet fuel, but not for compost.
Exactly. Yeah, they say this company or this organization, Beam Circular, claims that we have too much ag waste and that we can't compost it all.
Oh,
Baloney.
well,
Baloney.
well,
You're being sold a bill of goods by these people, that's for sure. You know, there's a hell of a lot of waste going on here, wasting of money. You'd be better off taking that 10 million bucks and buying land where you could put up a resource recovery park that would handle everything as a recyclable. You need that. You don't have it right now. It doesn't sound like.
so Bianca, you do an impressive amount of heavy lifting. But I want to open it up to questions from other people. So if you have questions, raise your actual hand or your Zoom hand, and I don't know.
Yeah, and I just want to say it's not just me, right? I'm only one person. I have been tasked with leading the organization and communities on the right path, but people on this call, Dennis with Zero Waste USA has been very instrumental in teaching us how to do zero waste and helping us navigate through zero waste plans. Susan and Vivian, they're zero waste champions in our communities that help elevate the work that VIP does. And then we have the communities who are actually struggling in the system and in this community to continue to advocate. So we do carry the torch, but we have a big team right behind us.
Mary Lou, you had a question?
Well, yeah, I do. My big question is, as you and other people are celebrating this really remarkable achievement, and big congratulations to you, and thank you so much for your persistence and willingness to develop your own in-depth knowledge. We've done that before you, and we haven't gotten the documents up online so that people can learn from our experience. So I think looking at Dr. Daniel Knapp over here, he's thinking about getting all that stuff up in an archive so that people have access to what we also developed. But I do have a question. I have an economic question. I know that a lot of cities fund and rely on funding from their garbage operations by getting kickbacks from the monopoly garbage companies. And they use that money to develop, to fund their city budget at the same time that they're developing a zero waste resolution. And cities are accustomed to holding incompatible ideas in the same brain, but it does drive them crazy. And so what we need to do is help them out by figuring out how much do they need, how much do they rely on from the garbage kickbacks, from monopoly franchising for garbage and other kickbacks. How much do they need? How much do they count on? And what can they anticipate from the development of zero waste businesses? Because Dan and I are from the business Urban R, and we generate $3.5 million in sales a year. And that's a huge amount in sales taxes that we collect, payroll taxes that, we have 42 employees. We collect a lot of payroll taxes. We pay a lot of property taxes. How much, who's doing the financial analysis, or could somebody please do the financial analysis to illustrate how much money would come back to you if you get rid of the kickback from, it's like heroin. If you get rid of the kickback from garbage, how much more could you expect from the development of zero waste enterprises from the same amount of resources? Do you know anybody who's doing that?
No, I was going to say that's my question. Can somebody help us with the financial analysis? That's our next step. So, I don't know about the kickbacks. That's something new that I would have to learn about. I'm also, we're also looking at how can we get some support on learning about the local funding. So we have the waste to energy financial committee, and there are millions of dollars in that committee. I don't understand where the money's coming from, what's going to happen with this budget when the incinerator goes away. But so your question is my question. I don't know who to reach out to for a financial analysis that would help us. What also you mentioned urban ore. I've been there. And I admire, the capabilities that you've been able to do. We have also toured the Monterey Bay facility as well, and they also have basically they're salvaging things that are coming to the landfill, and it's at the landfill, right? It's also, I think they're breaking even. They're not making money like urban ore is, but they have veterans, who are repairing and selling and working. Those are the kinds of systems that we want to have. We want to create jobs in our communities. We want them to be employee owned, and we don't necessarily need to get rich off of it. We just want to break even and be able to give people a job that they can pay their bills and feed their families while keeping these things out of the landfill. So we would be very grateful to get at least directed in the right place for this type of analysis. What does it take? How much money do I need to start to get an employee owned system going on here?
A lot of what we've learned is financial, and it's directly transferable to you. If we had your tonnage figures and we compared it to Berkeley's tonnage figures, we could give you a rough estimate of how much money is actually being wasted, because there's a lot about recycling that takes too much time right now to explain. But even with a company like Urban Ore, for example, you can get very quickly into the weeds. For example, we have our POS system recognizes 260 categories of reusable goods. Well, we have 442 people handling 260 categories of reusable goods, and that's where the money comes from. We actually sell it. That's really, we don't get any money from outside in the way of grants, and we're profitable. So it's possible to do it, but in order to do it, you need land, labor, and capital. Those are the three big items that you need to really get going. Land is one of the hardest to get. You want to buy the land if you possibly can, but there must be plenty of land in your area because you're rural. So the land prices are probably way less than here. So you have an advantage in that way. The labor side of it can be very flexible. We have a very interesting wage compensation system that we think is one of the most equitable in the world, because it's based not only on a base wage and then a wage that comes from sharing actual income, 15% of every of sales twice a month. And we also have profit sharing. So when we make a profit, we have a way of distributing that. And that incentivizes hard work and loyalty and honesty. It's very important to have an honest business in this field, because so much of what you see in the field of solid waste management is under the table. Believe me, there's a lot of it going on. But we've tried to be completely open and transparent with our numbers. And the last thing I'd like to say is that we've had for years the idea that we would love to take on people, call them interns, call them what you want, somebody from your community who wants to run something like what we've got, and have them come to work with us, and we'll teach them how to do it by doing it. and they'll get to see other people doing it. And they'll get to see how it actually works. It's very complex, but it's also totally and incredibly fascinating.
So I know Mike has a question, but I wanted to follow up something Dan said. So in terms of land, you have a piece of land that Covanta's not going to be needing anymore. Could
Right.
that land be repurposed for something like what we're talking about?
Yeah, and Dennis might have the resources available and open, but we do know that the landfill has a capacity to grow. So there is lots of space there. I'm not saying that we should keep putting things in the landfill because there's still a lot of room. But there, you know, the incinerator is going away. There are lots of spaces. Warehouses here in the county are being built without having a company ready for this warehouse. So we can definitely, I mean, right now, if we had the money and say, I'll buy that warehouse, let me use it for some urban ore kind of space, right? For a reuse, repair facility. But so there is lots of land and there's lots of opportunity.
Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, we'll come out of hiding here. Sorry, I'm busy cooking in the kitchen here. But Bianca, it's great to see you again, and congratulations. I'm really, really happy for you and your community. And looking forward to the last incinerator in Oregon being the next one to close, hopefully at the end of the year. Similar to what you did with getting state legislation passed, it's going to be a state bill in our case that we got passed last year that might do them in. Got a quick question and a comment. Comment first on John's point about claims about greenwashing that are made, like we burn so hot and that kind of nonsense that I've heard a lot of times. It can be hard for folks to know how to poke holes through that if you don't really dive into the weeds and figure out how to destroy their arguments. But that is what I specialize in. So if anyone's like, how do we blow up Covanta's arguments at any point, just reach out to me, because I do that all the time and it's fun, and I'm happy to myth bust and help arm you with those kinds of factoids and things that you need. And Bianca, I love the badass tactics against Covanta's tabling. That was just amazing. And I'm going to have to find an opportunity to apply some of what you taught me there. But so my question for you is, you mentioned that they try to burn medical waste, and we're working with folks in Oregon with that Covanta plant already burning medical waste. There's one in Florida, one in Alabama also doing that. And we're fighting in Bristol, Connecticut against a fourth one trying to do that. And now Tulsa, Oklahoma is being targeted with the same thing. It's a monetization strategy they have for their smaller plants. So I'm just curious to know, were they trying to do that? Did they ever get to do that? Was it a part of a monetization strategy for them too there? Do you know?
Yeah, it was in 2002 when I know the community was starting to protest and get the community involved. They didn't get to do the expansion. So I know that it requires a different set of permits. And so it did not go through, but I don't know the details of I'm guessing that it was just going to make them money. So I know that at some point, you know, Covanta started to brag about, well, we only manage, you know, waste from Stanislaus County. We're not bringing waste from outside, even though there was a small percentage of the waste that we knew for a fact was coming. But they would give us a percentage of 5%. They'd say, oh, about 5% is coming outside. But I think in reality, it was about more than 15% of the waste that was coming from outside of the area. But that's kind of another tactic that they used after they weren't allowed to expand with medical waste, that would say, well, we're not bringing it from outside. We're just dealing with your waste.
I see. All right, thank you.
So Bianca, I much appreciate your efforts at building connections. I hope you can make connection with some of the people on this call, particularly the Northern California Recycling Association. Been around a long time, knows a few things. I'm going to volunteer to send you the name I think is one of the leading experts in the public, I'm spacing out, the Public Records Act, so that the next time you get messed around with, you can call on somebody and he'll unmess it for you.
That would be very helpful. they're basically just filling up my inbox with a bunch of random documents. They don't even label them. They shared attachments and pictures, and then they don't connect them to, you know, where those pictures or what this picture is about, because, and then their excuse is, well, this is how we do it. And so I'm having to navigate lots of documents, and I'm not, you know, too sure how to make sense of it.
Well, that's what passes for advocacy in big law these days, and I just hate it. So whatever you can do to cut through that, I'm all for. If there's anything that I can do or anybody here can do to help, you should feel free to call on us. We do this show the second Tuesday of every month. Next month, we're going to be talking about land use and environmental justice in the southern states. So continuing with the theme, unless anybody has some other questions with Bianca, Tracy.
Excuse me, I'm sneezing. Yeah, Bianca, I remember we met about biochar. Yeah, and so I'm wondering, and first I want to congratulate you. It's really, really so awesome to get an incinerator shut down. We have a meeting about our incinerator. I mean, I don't take any personal possession of it, but it is the one in my county. And we have a new strategy. We'll see what happens, and we'll be sharing if we get anything to happen.
Tracy,
but
where are you?
I'm an hour north of Albany, New York, and this
Okay.
is Wheelabrator, Hudson Falls. It will be 33 years old in November. And the good thing is that neither of the two counties that built it use it anymore. So there's other incinerators that are owned by the counties, or all their waste goes to the counties. This incinerator had a contract that ended after 20 years, and the incinerator was sold to the operator, and the counties had finished their debt service and no longer had to put or pay contract. So there's also a landfill that's fairly new across the Hudson River. So that's a slightly lower cost choice for disposal. And so for those reasons, like, we have some good arguments for closure.
Right. Yeah. And I do recall the conversation about biochar. I do need to follow up with you, because that's what the county is trying to invest in, right? What do we do with the ag waste, and how can we profit off of it? And this organization, Beam Circular, is proposing that we can create biochar to capture the carbon back into the soil.
Yeah, well, much of that carbon goes up as CO2. So there's a lot of false climate solutions, as you all know. Anyway, feel free to reach out to me. You do still have my contact information?
Yeah, I believe so. But if you don't mind
Okay.
putting it in the chat,
I'll put it in the chat, and feel free to get in touch, especially by email, and we can set up a time.
Thank you. And I did see Mike's article on the chat too about bio last week at the Zero Waste Conference. So we'll have to use all of our resources.
Great. Okay.
So it's
Thank
worth
you.
saying that biochar is just another name for incineration with a slightly different twist. You're still burning it. That's why they call it char.
Right.
Yeah.
And this organization is saying, oh, we're not for incineration. We're not for increasing pollution and environmental justice communities. But here is the system that does pyrolysis and requires combustion. And we're like, well, wait a minute. Who is your engineer? Because this is all incineration. You're just calling it a different name.
That's right. You got it.
In our case, they were going to use pyrolysis on up to 720 tons of sewage sludge from the New York City, Long Island area every day.
Oh my.
And
water.
it's
water.
yeah, it's still pending, but there's 3 strategies at work, and I think I don't think it will ever be built. And if they ever get their permits, I think there will be civil disobedience. And I'm serious. There is such strong opposition in the community. over the course of 2.5 years that people
You're
would,
Westchester County, right?
excuse me?
Are you Westchester County?
No, this is
Oh.
upstate. This is Saratoga County in the semi-rural town of Moreau on the
Oh.
Hudson River.
Huh.
Moreau, Moreau.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. You can look up Saratoga biochar and you'll find a lot of contentious and critical stuff about it. They've
Yeah,
never-
does any, I see Dennis in the chat is asking if there's maybe any Skillshare or any presentations already created that kind of help define all the types of incineration using different languages or different terminologies to debunk some of this. And Mike, you said you were good at debunking some of these myths
we've
that are
got stuff on
provided.
it.
So if you have stuff like that, we will be creating, we will be hosting spaces, symposium, and summits, or whatever we want to call it, conferences in the community to build literacy with community, so that when this entity comes to their community and talks about biochar and biofuels, that people are fully informed about these false solutions and these different terminologies that really mean the same thing. But we actually don't have, we would have to create a lot of these presentations or definitions and do the research. But if that is already out there, no need to recreate and invent the wheel. So those are also some resources that we could use.
Again, congratulations for the achievement. Take a celebration, because we gotta celebrate when we have these wins. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be back the second Tuesday of next month with another discussion about environmental justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.